Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Architecting. I am so excited today to have as my guest Tenille Bettenhausen. Tenille has so many different facets to her. She's an author, she's a client success manager at Microdesk, she's a podcast host at Death by Architecture. We're going to dive into that. And then she's also a storyteller and recovering designaholic. So welcome to Neil.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I love podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how we met, was by comparing podcasts to one another. But I just love your whole story. So I saw that you started architecture school. You went to ASU. So we have living in Phoenix in our pasts as a kind of common through line. But tell me about that. Like, what made you want to be an architect, and how did you get from there to writing books and being a podcaster and working at Microdesk?
Oh wow, that's a that's a long road, but it all started in April. No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to be an architect, or I wanted to work in this industry because I really loved trying to understand different types of people and cultures, and like how people feel the process. Like I'm very much so a people person, which is probably why I'm in the career that I'm in today. But I didn't look at it as like the building side. I wanted to know like why people use buildings, like what what type of functionality a house has. Like I was always intrigued at how people could use a space. And so I went into architecture, the architecture program, also because my stepdad growing up was a civil engineer. And so he would take me to the oil, he was working in the oil industry, and it's dirty and gross, and like he was always grimy. And I was like, but he was always on AutoCAD. So he would let me like mess with the drawings. And so I was like, well, what can I do that's not dirty and grimy and gross? Still understand people and the process and how people utilize space. And so there was the right there was born the desire to be in this industry. And so I did go to Arizona State University. It was very hot. And I had to change course, and I came home because, like we talked about before, I couldn't find a job during the time that I was looking. We were right on the about to go into recession. And so I decided to come home to California, and I got my first job working in a firm, and worked in the firm on practice side, like doing design and construction, like really project managing and having my hands on a project for about 15 years. And so I worked in projects, doing Starbucks and banks. And that was like, that's all I ever did. It was like, if I saw Starbucks, I was like, I probably worked on that Starbucks. I worked on that shopping center. Um, and then I had my daughters. I had my oldest. My girls right now are 13 and 10. So I just couldn't spin all the plates. I was having a really hard time having a newborn, meeting project deadlines. The projects was working on were hospital projects. So they were after hours, and there was a lot of late nights. And so I went to my IDP mentor and I asked him, what do I do? Like, what am I doing? Like, I need help. And he said, have you ever done business development? And I was like, no, I have a background in architecture. Like, I've been doing this for 15 years. And he said that, you are great at building relationships. You know what a high performing team is. You know how to do a project from beginning to end, and you love people, and I think you'd be great at it. And so I walked right through that opportunity. He got me my first job in business development, and that's been about six years ago that I've been on the business development side. Still working, obviously, in AEC. I work in the design technology side now, so I'm still, I feel, affecting the change of the built environment. And so just a little differently now, working with architects that, and how they can build projects faster and better. So
Yeah,
that
and
was it in a nutshell.
I love that though, and I love how diverse our profession is because, like you, I started doing a lot of prototypes. I was doing Arco AM PM gas stations and convenience stores.
Me too.
So you can be doing that kind of corporate work. I work in healthcare now, so it sounds like you did too. So
Yeah.
you can work in different project types, right, which are completely different experiences one to the other. Or you can take that skill set and do something adjacent to the profession like
Yeah.
you're doing. So
Yeah.
I don't think we always take the time to appreciate what our architectural background can give us
Yeah.
in terms of a point of view and a way of navigating the world.
Yeah, I mean, it'll always be there. That the skill set that you attain from going to architecture school and working in this profession, it never goes away. And I've found that so many companies, in my conversations with my girlfriends that work that have backgrounds in architecture or even licensed architects, but now work for other companies because they're seeing that skill set be so necessary in their day-to-day business that doesn't have to do with the actual design, but we learn so much, like how to manage people, how to manage projects, that is so relevant that other companies like Amazon, Slack, Salesforce are hiring actual design professionals because they need that skill set that you just can't get in any other profession. So I mean, I had a lot of career pivots, and that's a whole different podcast episode. But I have, pivoted my career to a point where I found what I love and I'm deeply passionate about, and that's just really the people side. So it's been good though.
Yeah, that's really, I think, what I talk about a lot on this podcast is finding your passion,
Yep.
because the minute you know what you love, you get all this clarity.
Yep.
And now you see the world in a different way because there's a million things going on in the world at any given moment. There's so many opportunities, but most of them we don't even see because we're filtering them out.
Sure.
But when you have the clarity of what you want to do, you stop filtering it out and you start seeing what's possible. So tell me a little bit about what led you to create your podcast and how you find these cases to talk about and all of that.
Well, so I love podcast. I was probably like one of the early adopters to podcasting. Like I love like listening to NPR shows, which is now what was the beginning of podcasting. And so I love like the spoken word. I feel like we've really gotten away from that. Like that's like how I know about things from my family like ages ago because my grandmother told my mom and she told me. And so I felt like it all podcast just reminds me of that storytelling, right? And so I've always been intrigued by it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I was like, anybody want to listen to me yammer on about like whatever? I don't know. And the pandemic happened. And so my job is largely building relationships with architects and engineers. And so everything got canceled. There was no AIA conference. There was no like all the things that I would very traditionally do we weren't sure at the time, was it going to happen, was it going to get canceled, they didn't know. And so I thought, well, how else can I need to think outside of the box, how else can I connect? And I thought back to all the podcasts that I listen to. It's such an intimate medium that I know so much about the hosts. Like I'm inviting them into my car, I'm inviting them into my house, like I'm listening on my walk. And there's things that I know about each podcast host, like their family and the stuff that they tell, where I feel like that's building a relationship right there. And so I thought, well, what do architects want to listen to? And there's plenty of great podcasts like yours that talk about architecture and the profession. And I thought, well, I don't need to get into that space too, like just another person like talking about it, because I felt like we've done a great job of representing that voice. But I was like, what do I like to do? Because it is a labor of love, and I do love true crime. So I thought, well, what if like architects and engineers like committed murders or they were part of murder? So I just did a quick Google search, and that is how it was born. And I found I was like, if I can find at least 20 stories that'll keep me going for, a good year. And I mean, there are just no a multitude of cases that just things that I had never even heard about, like, the everybody knows who Frank Lloyd Wright is, but I had no idea that his mistress was murdered. Like, they left that part out of architectural history. Right? Nobody talks about that. And so I just found it fascinating. Like, and so many people have connected to that, like, wanting to hear about the stories. I keep them super short. They're only like, 15 to 20 minutes. And that you can listen to them in your like commute out to your job or whatever. But really, it was just to find a way to remain connected during the pandemic with my, end user, which are architects and engineers. But then I found that, like, it's kind of neat to tell the stories that need to be told. There's so many great stories, unfortunately they're about someone having their lives cut short, but there's stories that need to be continually told. Like, one of the podcast episodes I did was about workplace violence, and a woman was killed on a job site, at a construction job site, by her coworker. And to hear that, when I was researching the story, all the coworkers knew that they fought each other, that they didn't like each other, but no one said anything because they're like, oh, they just banter each other all the time. Like, don't worry about it. Or, none of the job site construction guys wanted to get involved. And so I think from that incident, spurred a lot of workplace violence, activity, where, like, what do white collar workers, like, how can we affect change on the sites? And then how can they change, and make it safer for them, beyond the hard hats and the PPE. But if you see something, you say something, and it could save a life. And so, to be able to continue to tell her story, which was great because I got to talk to the family, but also to help people. A lot of people didn't know this happened. It happened in California, and I had no idea that it happened. So it's been an interesting journey, but I did have to take a little bit of time. As you know, podcasting is a labor of love. It takes a lot of time to research it, and record it and edit it. But I wanted to find some space for my book, so it's on hiatus. I have stories that I want to tell and record, but it took a little bit of time for the book.
Yeah, but for those listening, they can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it is called Death by Architecture.
Yep, and it's true crime in our profession. And so it's not always like, people getting, well, most of the time it's people getting murdered, but it's not, all murder. It's crimes that we commit, and you would not believe how criminal, how much crime we actually commit in this industry.
Yet another skill we have. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? It's a bag of tricks. So.
No, I love it. And so now you have got your book published. It is available for sale. It's called Maybe I'll Be an Architect, and it is a book for children. So that's another big pivot for you. So what made you want to tell this story?
Well, I think back to the pandemic time, there was, I mean, obviously a lot has happened over this 2.5 year time period. And unfortunately, after the civil unrest in our country, and, there was a lot of conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was actually invited to a discussion, a state level AIA discussion about what can we do. And there's some big name architects in this. I was probably like 40 people, and me. I'm like, how did I get here? But I felt like it's such a big challenge, right? To be, diversify our profession, attract and retain the talent, right? And then, how to, and of women and people of color. It's just, I mean, it's mind boggling. Like, so we're in this room and we're talking, and it's like, almost stuck in analysis paralysis because, it's like, well, we need to do all of the things, but I mean, we just can't. We can't do everything. And so I walked away from this conversation thinking, well, what can I do? Because we're all just doing one little piece. What is it that I can do that would be simple? I kind of equate it to like, you're standing at a lake and you're throwing pebbles in, and they're little and they're tiny and they're creating this ripple, and you can't see what's happening 50 yards out. But what if we all were just throwing little pebbles and creating those ripples that create a bigger wave? And so that was the impetus for the book, was how do we attract and retain and beyond the problems that we have of like access to education. Not every university has a architecture school. We talked about that prior to recording. But if kids don't know that the profession is even an opportunity for them, we've missed out. We've missed that age group. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe it's not just about um, you know, career, architecture as a career, it's careers as a whole. Because my 10-year-old swears she's going to be a YouTube like star, right? I'm just going to make millions of dollars on TikTok and YouTube, which I think is great. But I feel like it's like a little bit like the NBA, right? Like a lot of people play basketball, but not all of them make it, big and make money off of it. So I thought, well, if kids are like my daughters and they get to see my husband and I as professionals, we both, went to school, we both work, full-time jobs and mid-level and senior level in our professions right now. But what about the kids that don't have that? They don't see mom and dad, and I can speak to that as my mom. I was raised by a single mom, but she was all I saw. And so what if, mom doesn't have the job that encourages career exploration? And so I took I went to Barnes and Noble. This is like kind of a funny thing. I went to Barnes and Noble and I said, where are your diverse books on like architecture and construction? And the girl was like, the what? And she had no idea. I felt so bad. She was like, dear God in headlines. Like, I have no idea. I don't know. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna write it. So I think it's been really neat because I've been asked to read the book to kids because I think that it's a whole nother chapter to it, right? It's an onion that keeps getting peeled, but being an author is actually a career. And so I think now kids, people, kids of color are seeing like, oh, that's an opportunity for me too. Like she looks
Yeah.
like me, so I can write books, I could be an architect, I could do all, and do whatever I want. And I feel like asking kids today what they want to be with when they grow up is almost taboo. Like, oh, like stifling them or something. I don't know. But you've got to be able to answer that question because you're going to get to 18 and you don't know. So, because you've never been asked or you've never explored it. So, it's been super awesome. I swear, I saw this in the podcast when I released the podcast, that this profession is so mighty to support each other. Like, I put it out there and people are like, yes, this is so awesome. And then when I released the book, I'm in a Mothers of Architecture Facebook group, and they rallied so hard around the book that it became the number one children's release in architecture books, in two categories. So number one in architecture books for kids, and number one in diverse books for kids, because this
Oh, wow.
mighty
Congratulations.
to support. And it's been great. And so I hope that, like, it won't stop. I am going to do an AEC collection. So maybe I'll be an engineer, maybe I'll be a general contractor, and I'm translating maybe I'll be an architect into Spanish. So that'll be available probably in a couple weeks. So
Wow.
yeah. And also working full time and have two kids. It's crazy over here, but we're getting it done.
Yeah. You're my people.
Yeah. Like, give me more. It's like swimming in the
Yeah.
ocean with like holding two babies. And I'm like, I'll take another one. Just
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
me more. So,
Well, for me, like I get bored, right? So it's like I like the challenge of figuring something new out. And then once I figure it out, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do this anymore.
yeah, moving on now. I think, to having a background in design, being able to bring projects to fruition, right? Like, pulling those permits to cutting the ribbon. It's a process, and each project, even today, as I drive by some of them, I'm like, I remember, like, it's like blood, sweat, and tears of like being a part of the project team and working in business development. I don't have I don't have those creative projects to bring to fruition, and so the podcast and the book are very much so how I scratch that creative itch. And but then now it's also building community. I get to talk to people, like I got to meet you, and I mean, like we cross paths with so many different people every time I start a new, project, that it just opens up another set of doors. That This has been really awesome, and it's what I love doing, is connecting with people. So it's like, what more can I do? And my husband's like, oh gosh, here we go, another wild,
But
another
it's
wild
not.
adventure.
Yeah, but it's not, because it's so important that you keep growing and keep evolving. And I love that you're willing to really be brave about it, not just do like little incremental shifts, but when you get an idea that you feel empowered to go for it. So,
Oh yeah.
what advice would you have? Because a lot of people maybe it might pop in their head, I could write a book or
Mhm.
start a podcast or start my own business or whatever their dream is, but they almost immediately turn the tap off
Yep.
because they are afraid. So, what do you do when you get these ideas to really take that next action step?
Well, I think a lot of times what's holding people back, because I do, like, so many people have said, oh, I want to do a podcast, and I'm like, do it. I want to write a book. Great, do it. But I think what holds people back is that they are just too busy. Like, for me, I'm a mom. I've got a full-time job. I'm married, and there's just a lot. I'm volunteering all over the place, PTA and all that stuff. So when I have an idea and I think, oh, I cannot do another thing. My husband actually said, you need to Marie Kondo your life, right? So Marie Kondo is like the,
Yeah,
pick a
yeah.
shirt and like, does it bring me joy? It doesn't, throw it away. But I laughed at him at first, but I was like, okay, that's kind of brilliant, because, I'm on the PTA, and I'm a joiner. If you ask me to do something, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, whatever you need, because I want to be a part of it. It's that building community part of me. But it's like, is it bringing me joy? And if it's not, it's got to go. And so I knew right then, like, writing this book, when I first thought about it, I was like, it's gonna bring this. This is exciting to me. I want to complete it. So I had to make room for it, because we'll make room for the stuff that brings us joy and makes us happy. And if that's podcasting, if that's writing a book, if it's cooking, whatever it is, you just have to make room for it. And then it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be the big, I don't know. I don't know if this book is going to spark the interest of a kid that wants to be an architect, or whatever, or changes their path. So it doesn't have to have a big outcome, but I think you just have to continue to just do it. I mean, it could be this teeny tiny thing that you don't know. I don't know what will happen. And it's like like I said, the pebble in the lake, the ripple will continue on, and I let that ripple go, and that's okay, because maybe something good will happen at the end. And I'm not like saving the world. I wrote a kids book, but it's, I think that's what I would say to people that are afraid to take that next step, is to just do it. If it brings you joy and you think that it's, what you're passionate about, yeah, just do it. You're not gonna fail at it. I mean, I could have, there's a lot of things that I think I could have done that, like my pandemic sourdough bread, fascination that I had over the last year and a half, and I still have not perfected it, but I had to like put that away. But I'll get back to it. It'll be okay. It's another creative outlet for me. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that you mentioned failure because I think a lot of time we are such control freaks and such perfectionists that we hold ourselves back because we don't want to even try unless we know we can succeed. But I'm
right.
always saying failure is how you learn. Fail early, fail often, and you can always course correct. But if you never take action, nothing ever changes. So,
Right.
talk a little bit more about that and how you just go boldly on, and how do you know when you need to course correct, and how do you know when you need to just let something go and try something new?
Yeah, I don't know. I went into specifically about the book. I was like, even if my mom is the only person that reads it, it's totally fine, right? Like that's one person, it's great. And so I didn't even think about what happens if it's a failure. It's okay because if, like you were saying, like if you don't take the leap, then it just never it's never going to happen, and you just won't know. And there have been times, honestly, I have not done it perfectly. Like self-publishing is a beast, and there's mistakes that I've made along the way. But you just course correct. I mean, I just briefly, like one of the mistakes that kind of comes to mind, which I find really interesting, is there's wisdom around waiting to launch your book, like building that team of people, which I had because the mothers of architecture, they're awesome. Hi, I want to say hi if they listen to this. Hi, because you guys are awesome. And so I was building this team, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get like, I don't know, 10 moms, maybe 20 of them to read this thing and talk to their friends. I posted it one time, and I had 300 people that were wanting to support me and read the book and talk about it to their communities. And so, like I said, there was wisdom around building this launch team. And I accidentally published the book. But I was like, it was late at night. I was looking at some stuff and I hit publish. And I'm like, no, 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 my launch team hasn't even seen it yet. So what am I going to do? And I was like all upset, and it's all out there. And Amazon has an algorithm that you want to make sure the first 10 days is out. It's everywhere and people are talking about it. And I was like, I don't know. So I had to course correct, and I pulled it off of the shelves. I had to recreate another book, and with another ISBN. But that was a mistake that I had at that point had to decide what I was going to do. Am I going to just let it be out there and just go, okay, well, or do I course correct? And so I decided to course correct, which was a costly effort, but I'm glad that I did it. And so we just every day have to like try it and see if it's going to work out. And if that doesn't work, we try something else. But that's basically, I don't know if it's going to be successful, great. I don't know. I was okay with it just being my kids, were like, oh, I'm on the cover of a book. That's cool too. Like they're all excited about it. So I was like, that's a win. It's a win in their minds, and that's okay too. But we just have to just try it. You got to step out on faith, because otherwise, like, and I think that that's very much so a professional hazard, right? Like you got to try all the things and throw it out there and see what sticks. And
What I think is so beautiful about what you just said is how light you were about it. And you clearly were very motivated to do it. You've talked about how much it means to you, yet you didn't get too attached to it.
no, no.
And I think that lightness helps you be more successful because you're more willing to be vulnerable about it. You're more willing to ask for help. You're more willing to just say whatever happens happens, and there's not that kind of like overly pushing energy that we can have sometimes
Yes,
when we feel like we can't make a mistake or it has to work, and that can actually repel people versus
yes,
being light about it makes them as excited as you are.
right. Right. There's definitely wisdom in that. And I like I said, if it but I would fail forward. That's what I like, just keep on. I mean, and that's very true to my career. I don't feel bad. There was a touch of feeling sad that, when somebody, like family members are like, oh, you got a new job, another one. I'm like, all right, well, it's okay. You just gotta keep on, trying and figuring it out. You're not gonna have just one job in your life. Like, you got to find what you love and what you're passionate about. And that might not be at that particular job, and it might not be in that particular career. But I did have fear, like around, because like you were just saying, it's very intimate, right? Like podcasting is very much so. It's our voices. Like I said, I know a lot about the people that put on shows, because you're letting people into your life. And I think the book is very similar, where everybody has an opinion. I would have done it this way, or I would have said this. And so there is fear wrapped around that, where I the groups that I posted about it in, I asked for permission probably weeks before I actually posted the post that said, I wrote this book and I need your help. And so there's definitely, so I don't want it to come off as like, just bull in the china shop and I'm just going. There's definitely fear wrapped around it, but the motivation to get it out and to do it and to see where it could go was what drove me past that fear. They're like, and that everybody, like I said, very supportive AEC community to rally around me and be like, oh my gosh, how come we didn't know before? How come we didn't tell us? Like, so it's the good and the bad, but I say go for it. Every time, anytime somebody says they want to do something, I'm like, do it, and just gotta power through it. So
Yeah. So, looking back, if you could give advice to the 18-year-old you who was starting architecture school, what would you want her to know?
this is a family friendly podcast. So, just kidding. Just kidding. I would say, wow, I don't think I would have changed anything. I think that the 18-year-old me would be probably surprised that I'm not like having my own firm right now, right? Or hanging my own shingle to design. But I think I would tell the 18-year-old Tenille to just keep going and don't let it, whatever anybody else says, like the family or whatever, there's that trope of like, you're successful if you're a doctor, a lawyer, an architect. don't don't listen to any of that. Just keep going, and it'll work itself out. The road is set, and I don't think I would have changed it. It's been great. And um I mean, silly enough, I sometimes think, oh, I could have been a veterinarian, like, or I could have done nursing or dental hygienist, but I don't think that I would have changed anything. And so 18-year-old me would be probably surprised, but I think pleasantly surprised at the journey.
Yeah, yeah. That success doesn't have to look only one way. And I
Right.
think that is a wisdom that we definitely acquire. So, Tanil, before we go, I want to make sure everyone knows where they can find your book and your podcast and connect with you
Oh
and
yeah.
all of that good stuff.
Well, so first the podcast. It's Death by Architecture. Like you said, it's available anywhere you can listen to podcasts, like Apple, Spotify. It is on a little bit of a break, but I'm hopeful to be releasing new episodes in the new year. And the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you live locally, it's in Barnes and Noble stores, and I've signed those. If you live locally, it's at the AIA office where I've signed those. But it's anywhere online, Walmart, Books a Million, and it's like I said, Amazon, right? Yes, Amazon. And so you can purchase a book there. I would love, 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 love it. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, Tenille Bettenhausen. If you want a signed copy, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can get a signed copy and, obviously work that purchase through me and be able to send it. I've had a couple of people reach out to me on LinkedIn and say that they wanted to send it to their IDP or APX mentors or people, that they worked for, old principals that they worked for in their offices. And so I've been able to send signed copies. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just connect with me and we can make that happen too. But that's it. And maybe it'll be in the show notes and you can click all that and get in touch with me.
I will definitely do that. But
Awesome.
thank you so much. That is so generous of you to do that. And everybody, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you want to share an insight, I know Tenille would very much appreciate it. So you can post on LinkedIn, or I know you also are on Instagram. Is it Death by Architecture on Instagram?
Yes, it's the Death by Architecture Pod on Instagram, and then Tenille B Writes is the book Instagram. But yeah, so connect with me any type of way. I also have a website. It's Tenille B Writes, and you can connect with me there too. So I'm all over the internet. So
You gotta be. You gotta be.
Oh, awesome.
Wherever you are, that's where I am.
All over it in a good way, hopefully.
Yeah,
So.
but definitely do that, because I know we all love to hear when something resonates. So definitely share if you've got any insights, and tag Tenille and tag Architecting Podcast. And thank you again for being on. I loved our talk, and we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Oh, thank you. I loved it. I love listening to your podcast. I actually, before when we talked, I felt like it's just like spending time with catching up with old friends. I just love that. I love that energy about your podcast. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been great.
You are welcome. Take care. All right. Wait, stop.